So welcome everyone to this Detail Lab session. Today I invited Mirko Ross. Mirko is based in Germany. He's the founder and CEO of Asvin, a startup that is focused on cybersecurity. Mirko is also a professor, and he sits in a few committees within the European space. Welcome, Mirko, and it's great to have you today. I would like to ask you to, for people that don't know you, a brief introduction and talk a little bit about some of the committees that you are in within the Commission.
Yeah, hi Antonio, and thanks for inviting me. Yeah, you announced me very well. I'm Mirko Ross, co-founder of Asvin. I'm a geek, I'm a nerd, I'm an activist, I'm a writer, publicist, entrepreneur, and a father of a daughter. And by that, I really appreciate to be engaged on cybersecurity and everything to build a secure digital world. And I'm as well a community builder, and by the profession to build communities, I'm as well active in some committees. These are industrial committees regarding cybersecurity, for example, providing feedback and advices for political institutions like the Commission, for example. So by that, I'm very engaged on that level.
Thank you. One of my proposals to start this conversation is to look at at public sector, particularly focus on cybersecurity, data protection, and GDPR. We know that in the recent past, many public sector entities, hospitals, city councils across Europe they have breached GDPR, or they were under cybersecurity threats. So why do you think that these situations are still happening? Cybersecurity is as old as the internet, and we have regulation and more regulation, but it seems that governments are not paying enough attention to the details.
Well, to be honest, I think it's not so easy. Cybersecurity is a very complex topic. It's not only a technical topic. It's a topic of humans, of human failures, of human opportunities. It's a topic of processes. It's a topic of readiness. Is your organization cybersecurity ready? And so on. So that's the reason why cybersecurity is not so easy. We have the tendency to think it's just a technical topic, like you need to patch and update your systems and then you're safe and secure, or install your antivirus or whatever. However, this is not the solution, I think so. And by that, as it is a complex topic, if we come to data, it's getting more complex because we're currently in a world which is full of digital transformation. And digital transformation means we are increasing our digital footprint ourselves. So what kind of data we are sharing with the world. And as well, we are increasing the attack surface. So we are getting more and more vulnerable, not only institutions, but as well we as persons, or we as citizens, we as people. So by that, it's first of all an interesting time. And now the question is, if digital transformation is going on and our digital footprint is increasing and the surface is expanding as well, how do we deal with this? I think the most question is, how do we deal with this? I believe, unfortunately, that we will never get a state where our data will be super secured. It seems to be that this is impossible. It's impossible in terms of resources you have to invest. It's impossible of the way economic reasons or practical reasons. So by that, I think we need to have answers on how do we deal with insecurity. And you have named the GDPR. The GDPR, for example, has a very good advice on it. It says, well, collect only data you really need for your service. Be very strict. Don't collect everything if you don't need it. Collect only the data you need, because if data is getting breached and stolen, then it's only that level of data. It's not the completely bucket of data, and that's a very good advice, I think so. And
No, I agree, Mirko, but let's say, but if you are a hospital,
yeah,
no, you have to collect critical data, and that critical data uh, is useful and is important in order to deliver the service and to take care of the patient. Who is actually the owner of the data.
yes,
So it brings uh, um, some issues and sometimes the feeling that I have it in this particular area in the public sector, it doesn't seem to have enough investment, not only in technology but sometimes also in training of the people working on these organizations.
yes. You named it right. It's not one single point of failure. It's, as you said, you need people to be trained how to deal with data. You need your technical infrastructure up to date, and then you need to invest in your technical infrastructure, because otherwise you're running with old machines which can't be patched and updated. But however, there's as well technical progress, which makes it rather hard to protect personal data. Let's give me one example. If we take, for example, um, the radio um, the radio image sector, where a lot of images are created by patients. And usually there's a high effort on how to protect this kind of data sets, this image data sets, like encryption, who can access it. I think there's a high level already installed in hospitals there. But however, it makes sense to share these images for different purposes. Like, for example, if you want to have more research on a specific disease, you can now connect data sources worldwide collecting this kind of radio image data for improving their research. And then they are going for anonymization of this data, which is very good. So usually you don't know the name of the patient because it's just, let's say, swiped out of the images. Now, I know from and this is a real case, I know from a project who was doing this on brain specific topics for brain diseases. So what they were collecting were radio image data of heads, of patient heads, because if you have a look in the brain and there are slices, image slices of the brain, if you put them together, you have a 3D model of a complete head. This is an anonymous data set. So there is no name on it on who's that person or this patient at the moment. What if I use AI-based facial recognition? And just a public service in the internet, if I feed it with this 3D images of heads, I get immediately hits where the system is telling me, look, I found this kind of persons who is a match by facial recognition. This means whatever you do on protecting this data, on anonymizing this data, is the strongest way how to protect it. It's not possible to protect a patient from being breached in that moment, because there are new technologies coming in. And if you combine these technologies like AI facial recognition, you can do a remodeling of the ID of the patient. And this is something where the GDPR has no answer on it. Even nobody in the industry has an answer of that, how to deal with that kind of technology mix and services mix, which are already available on the market.
No, and that also opens quite of a Pandora box in relation to many things, because imagine that there are data sets that were collected years ago. There was some regulation in place to protect those data sets, and now there's new technology that is able to somehow breach the protections that were made in the past.
Yeah, look
So
at genomic data.
yeah.
I mean, a lot of course, patient data is genomic data as well. It's a super high relevant protected data set by the GDPR, by the way, because I mean, this is super personal. Now what we have is we had a lot of public-private operated genomic databases where people were doing this for ancestry reasons. And now comes the point, it doesn't mean that I have put my genomic data set in a public ancestry database, but if some of my relevance did this, it's already enough to remodel it to me, to a person. And this is as well, it shows us, if I look in a silo hospital, I can do my best to protect the data. But if I add other sources and I do a recombination, and let's say if I use all the way of modern analytics, I can recompile the identity of this genomic sets, even if I've never submitted it to any ancestry database. And that's the limit of data protection we have at the moment.
And it's interesting to look at solutions to address that, but at the same time, is also important to recognize that in the limit there's no privacy, particularly in the area of bullying and teenagers and sometimes between adults sharing private pictures through secure apps. We know how those images ended up someplace else, because the people, they saw, oh, this is only between us. But from the moment that is in the digital format, it's with the world, not just between the two of you.
Yeah, exactly. And what we are now getting is sometimes the payback of, let's say, how we had a data footprint in the past. There are some studies out there of data sets in the darknet, like what kind of data sets are available in the darknet. And these data sets have been, let's say, aggregated from illegal sources or actions like data leaks, hacks, and so on. And there are very good studies out there who shows how much, if you combine all these data sets which are already available in the darknet, how much you can create or how much you know about a specific person in the web. And this is really very critical. It means whatever we do as an institution, of course, we need to protect the data, no question. But we as users, we need to be super aware that we are super vulnerable already, because a lot of data from us is available in the darknet. It's just a question of what kind of money, how much money the attackers are investing on aggregating specific data. And that is really a problem. So I think we need to think about our personal firewalls. What will be our personal firewalls in terms of data? And of course, what I'm as well very aware of is that we need a paradigm shift as well in corporations and institutions, how we deal with data. I remember in the past, there was this slogan, data is the new oil. You remember that, Antonio? It's completely bullshit. But of course, the idea of the slogan was, if I want to run a big data project in my company, I need to talk with my boss to get the money of it. Of course, I need to say, well, data is the new oil, because this has an implication of a return of invest for my project. Let's say it in that way. The result was that companies were collecting insane amounts of customer data and were aggregating this, because someone told them data is the new oil and we need to collect oil. Okay. But in reality, data is the new burden, because when you collect data, you need to protect it. And if you're not investing in data protection, you're getting doomed, because from a regulatory perspective, because you bring your customers into danger, you bring your company into liabilities, and so on and so on. So data is not the new oil, data is the new burden. That's, I think, the right message to the man.
And more the data you collect is data that you don't need or end up not being useful, more it becomes a liability.
It becomes a liability, and it costs you tons of money to store the data in the cloud. It's a permanent it's a permanent cost factor. So why companies are doing that? If it's just a burden, if it's not essential for their business model, if they think it could be essential for our future business model, and they think and think and think, and they think that since 10 years that it's essential.
Yeah, but sometimes it depends on the data, of course. But sometimes if the data, the methods that were used to collect that data, and if that data, it could be 5, 10, 15 years, the method of collection might also create an issue that can make that data set not valuable according to ethics and to the standard that we use today. So unable to fix the data patterns in the old data. So you need to collect data in the new way in order to fit into the modern ethical patterns to make sure that, let's say, people, a certain ethnic group is not excluded, for example.
Exactly. I mean, that's what we see, for example, in artificial intelligence. Of course, you need data to train models, AI models. But what we see, of course, from a data perspective is that sometimes these data models are trained with a bias in the data set. So this is not a representation of a real world data situation. It's a representation of what kind of data was available in the organization, and there's already a bias in there. We had this with facial recognition. Remember, like there had been databases where you could look for criminal people, and then it was fed with pictures from politicians, and even they haven't been criminal, but the AI was associating them with criminals. Why? Because they had some certain bias in the data, like the color of the face, the skin, and so on. And this is critical. This is super critical.
Another topic that I would like to talk with you in a kind of a European context, considering that you have the opportunity to engage with European leaders, we know that we have different groups in Europe that where ministers have the opportunity to engage on a regular basis. And we have the Euro group, where all the finance ministers, they have regular meetings and talk and have these engagements about the financial situations in Europe. But do you feel that there's an ongoing conversation about these topics that we're talking here today across the different countries? Is this something that is happening regularly, or this is something that is being channeled through prime ministers? What is your view there?
Well, first of all, of course, we have Europe, but Europe is a foundation of member states. So we have different member states and different situations. For what I see in Europe, of course, we have these large countries like France, Germany, Italy, which are, especially Germany and France, are very united on the way how to deal with cybersecurity and data. I think there's a very strong axis on this. And then there are the smaller countries stepping in, having as well, like the Netherlands and Belgium's, which are as well very which have influence. So what I see, we are living in times with very heavy geopolitical disruptions at the moment. And what I see is that there is an understanding of that there is a bigger need on how Europe can be protected. And having data security, cybersecurity in there is not only a question of protecting the economy. I think this was the questions the last 10 years, the idea that this is damaging the economy. But now what we see is, it's a question of protecting really our governance structure on the way, what is Europe, protecting Europe on an essential way. So this is really has become a question, a very critical question. And by that, I see more and more, if I go into discussion with political leaders, that there is a much bigger awareness on that we need to invest or spend more efforts on these issues, how to protect our infrastructure, and data is included.
But do you feel a sense of urgency? Because we know when during the financial crisis and even during COVID, there was a kind of a sense of urgency that we need to fix this. Do you feel that there is a sense of urgency in relation to cybersecurity in Europe and making sure that all the states are aligned?
Yes, look at the damages. It's rather simple. Look at the economical impact. And I think, I mean, it's not announced so much in public about all this ransomware and stuff which is ongoing. Usually, let's say 3 years ago or 4 years ago, ransomware was stated as, let's say, a criminal act. This is cybercrime. Now, and this was even with the colonial pipeline, I think so, at one big incident in the US, it was the first time that it was stated as an act of war, an act of terrorism. I think they called it an act of terrorism, which is a paradigm shift as well. Because, to be honest, ransomware is an asymmetric warfare. It's part of an asymmetric warfare. It's one element of war we see currently in Europe, in the Ukraine. And ransomware is all about on weaken the Western economy. That's the whole, and weaken the Western infrastructure, weaken our hospitals, weaken the backup of people, weaken the system. That's an element of ransomware, and and this is a perception which has changed. I think before it was, it's just criminals. There's a cybersecurity insurance. It will cover everything. There's law enforcement. They will take care. But now there is awareness that this has a much bigger political picture.
Do you see organizations like the Interpol as having a key role on that? I'm just asking because just a few days ago there was a post that the Interpol is testing metaverse solutions, trying to find ways to regulate that space. Isn't I found that it's great that they are doing this because local authorities and police forces, they need to be called attention to this. But how do you see the role of Interpol in all this?
I see the role of Interpol and Europol. It's maybe I have a stronger focus on Europol, to be honest. But we have seen in the past that they had the ability really to hit criminal infrastructure in that way. And criminal infrastructure doesn't mean only cyber criminal infrastructure. It's as well, as I said, infrastructure for hybrid warfare. So there had been significant success on that. And this is as well remarkable because we have seen in the past that the law enforcement authorities have worked as well rather in silos than on collaboration. And now we see collaboration rising. But of course, there are as well some strange situations. For example, when Europol was shutting down EncronChat, and for the people out there, EncronChat was a messenger service for criminals, for organized crime, which was secure. There was an app on, and what Europol managed to breach the servers, the EncronChat servers in the Netherlands. And by that, they had the possibility to read all the messages of cyber crime and organized crime. Very interesting chat protocols, by the way. But however, there had been tons of data breached by law enforcement from cyber criminals organizations. And we, for example, in Germany had a specific situation that the law enforcement was not allowed to use the majority of the data of this breach because the German justice said, well, this action is not covered by the data privacy rules in Germany. So you can't use it as law enforcement. And this has two sides. I think this element has two sides. It shows us, for example, if you do the same in Denmark, the Danish police is much more using that stuff. But in Germany, we have a very specific experience with totalitarianism, with surveillance, and so on. So the state organizations are much more aware of what are the red borders you can cross towards using such data. However, there have been other nations in France and even the Dutch police, and they were using the data in another way, and the organized crime has been really significantly hit by this breach. And this gives me as well hope. It shows us that the law enforcement is working on a very high level. And it shows as well that the national way on data protection is different. But however, it's not a major obstacle to tear down collaboration in law enforcement.
You are a father of a daughter, as I am. I was recently talking with a researcher of a university in Finland who did a study on young people, and she was telling me that she's very concerned about how they perceive how the web works. And she was telling me, well, younger people, younger generations are doing very poorly in terms of in protecting themselves online, even in terms of cybersecurity, than their older parents, even of their grandparents. So how can we educate this generation in order to be aware of the dynamics of the web, to allow them to protect themselves? Because they can easily install an app on their phone, they might not think too much, and suddenly they are putting themselves at risk.
I think the ways we as parents, Antonio, we need to take our responsibility on education. So first of all, it doesn't make sense to just go for a prohibition of using digital tools for them, because they will use it anyway. They will find a way to use it. My way was always, if there is a new app, for example, like a game, like one of these massive, super playing multi-user games, I was always very curious. I said, come on, let me play the game as well with you. Just that I understand how are the mechanics, or how is the social relationship in these communities. And then I was telling her, of course, if someone is pinging you in a chat, be very suspicious. This could be an old man which has very, very bad intentions, for example, because of course, if young kids are playing on that game, it always will attract as well people with bad intentions to be there. So and I explained to her what are the possibilities, where she needs to be aware. That's number one. Second, now she's educating me. And that's as well very good. For example, I mean, Antonio, you and me, we have a very large digital footprint on social media. So we are posting a lot, pictures of us, of other people's, and so on. She's very aware if I would post any picture of her, she would say, delete it. Even sometimes I've posted a picture where you can see her, but I only show her from the backside. So but even then she says, well, no, that's not okay. It's me. And I think that's the right attitude. I mean, then I can say, well, we did it very good on the education. She's very aware of her digital footprint at the moment.
And I also, my daughter was we did some work with her. So every time that something odd happens on the phone or on the computer, or she takes a screenshot, or she came to us telling us, look, is this okay?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's a matter of trust, isn't it? It's like something is happening strange. Do they have the trust to go to you and ask for your advice or assessment? And even we have the situation that it works. And we made some clear rules. For example, on the level of apps and games to be used, of course, we want to know it, what kind of apps and games. And we excluded some, but on a consent based, like she's not allowed to use TikTok. And to be honest, she's not missing TikTok. Why? Because she has a lot of friends using TikTok, and she said, look, they are all lost in TikTok. There's no interactions
but
anymore.
there's also an issue with peer pressure, because sometimes some are able to resist, others are not, and that poses a problem to parents and to children. And there was a recent report in UK where a large amount of children, they fake their identities, and sometimes I don't think they are faking their identities. Probably their parents are faking their identities in order to be able to access the apps. So that's also an issue that is because I know a few cases where now parents created Instagram accounts for kids under 13, just because they want them to be there and they want them to have the app because of peer pressure.
Yes, of course, there's peer pressure in there, and but I think there are many different platforms where they are interacting. It's not
Yeah.
only, for example, TikTok, but there are some of them are, let's say, they have all different characteristics. So if we talk specific about TikTok, there's a clear understanding that this is a kind of interaction which is not, we do not wish her to engage. So, and she made for herself the decision that it's even a bad time investment on TikTok. Let's say it in that way. But however, she's using Discord, or she's using WhatsApp, or she's using Instagram, and so on. And it would not make sense to say, well, you have to stop that, because her peer groups, that the strongest way of communications and interactions are in these peer groups. Let's take Discord, for example. Because that's the way how they are interacting.
No, in my case, they they created and they use Microsoft Teams as a kind of a school group.
Yeah.
And they use that also out of school, but and they use it not in work that directly with the school, but sometimes they do homework together. They just call each other and ask for help, and they use Teams in order to do that type of work. And yeah.
Which is maybe important there is in terms of data protection, data privacy. For example, we, from an educational perspective, we respect her digital spaces as private spaces. So we would not control what she's writing there. It's a full trust principle. And this is important, I think so. Because
Yes, no, I believe so. I think it's important I think it's important to have a kind of have open communication, and where they can tell whatever they are feeling or whatever they are doing without being afraid. So I think it's very important to create that type of environment and trust.
Yeah. But the key, I think, is education, and one important message is, don't think about that the school should do this education. It's
True.
we as parents who need to take the responsibility in a way, even how we use the technology. And then, of course, the peer groups. I mean, that's something you can't control, to be honest. It's a peer group. But I'm always also looking to support the schools, to educate the teachers, to bring them more to digital technologies, to keep pace with the development and stuff like that. That's also super important, because I think only people who understand technology can do good decisions on how they protect themselves. That's the most important thing. If you understand how the things are working, you can protect. If you have no clue about how it works, I mean, if you have no understanding of this, if you're just a user, you
No,
can't.
because we are in the different, we went to generations that had to build their own computers by hand. You have to assemble things. You had to if you wanted to improve your computer, you have to do it by yourself almost. And today you just receive this package, and there you go. Everything is in there. If it's not working, you replace with another one. So the notion of things are built have been a little bit lost. And I think it's interesting if we are able to do an effort that we are able to recover and educate and explain, in fact, how everything works before you can turn the button of a computer on.
And you said, well, Interpol has now started, let's say, a metaverse police station. It sounds, of course, like a nice PR stunt, to be honest. But however, let's take this as an action of respect. It means that Interpol is dealing with such new technology trends, even if they say, well, this is maybe not a majority of our work, but they try to learn how these new technologies are working. And then as well, they try to learn what is the possibility of misuse, what are the security problems, what are the vulnerabilities, and what are the elements where we can help people to be to interact on a secure level in this environments. I mean, it's fantastic. Not that I think that a metaverse is fantastic, but however, it's fantastic that they have the resources to do that.
True. So, Mirko, thank you so much for this conversation. It was great to catch up on these topics. This is a conversation that never ends, but is a conversation that needs to happen all the time, even over a barbecue at home. It's important to have this conversation with our family members because it's everyone is exposed to this type of topics. So thank you so much once again, and look forward to continue our online conversations.
Yeah, thank you, Antonio, for having me. Bye.